All right, what's going on, everybody? Ryan Ogren here, and today we're going to be talking about how data center developers make money, okay? And there's a bunch of different types of data center developers that are out there. There's a bunch of folks that are developers, and they're pretty much just like connectors that are like us. There's also folks that are actually building the infrastructure on these sites and then leasing out the space. So there's different roles in this particular data center developer title, but without further ado, let's get into it. So for those that don't know me, for those that are new, I'm Ryan Ogren. I'm a former pro baseball player, and now I'm a private equity investor in the data center and energy infrastructure space. I actually had to learn this industry from the ground up just 2 or 3 years ago. It was actually 3 years ago now. No, it's 4 years. I didn't even know what a substation or a transformer was. I had to learn this industry literally from the ground up. And the reason I'm making these videos, one, deal flow. I think once you guys start to see the content and the education behind what we're currently doing, we might be able to get more deals to come through this YouTube channel. But also at the same time, number two is we're gonna have a huge staffing issue. I'm 28 years old. I know I look a little bit older, but there's not a lot of other 28-year-olds in this particular industry, but we're building infrastructure and assets that my generation is going to have to take care of. Everyone that's probably watching this video, you guys are probably a little bit older, and we need to get more young people in this space. So I'm making these videos because I'm trying to solve that future staffing problem that we're about to run into. So those are the two reasons I'm making these videos. So if that aligns with what you're looking for, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. How do data center developers actually make their money? So let's just take the data center landscape apart real quick. So there's different end users, okay? The data center companies, we call them data center tenants, end users, hyperscalers, whatever you really want to call them. And there's different types. For the most part, the stuff on the headlines is going to be the hyperscale data centers. And the hyperscalers, think of Amazon Web Services, AWS, think Meta, think Oracle, think Google, think Microsoft. Those five are the main ones. You can throw XAI in there, but I don't necessarily classify them as a hyperscaler. They're pretty targeted in their approach. But those five are the hyperscalers, and those end users are pretty much the ones that are writing the checks for these massive sites. Now, there are private equity firms on the Wall Street. There are energy infrastructure firms that are doing these big checks as well, but they're playing different roles in this. And there's also the colos, and I've done a video about who the colos are. They're the ones that actually buy and operate and develop data centers and then lease the data center out to these hyperscalers or the end users or the AI companies that are out, or just other data center companies that are out there too, because AI data centers and data centers are a little different. But how does a data center developer make money? And so I'm going to speak to the hyperscale developers. Hyperscale sites, they have certain specifications, right? You need to have a big campus, you need to have a ton of power, and you need to have certain things around it. You also need to have water infrastructure. You also need to have grid infrastructure. You need to have a bunch of different things. You need to have zoning. You need to be in an area that a hyperscaler actually wants to be in. So there's all different types of things that happen, and I'll do a full video on site selection so you guys can actually see how we select our sites. But data center developers for the hyperscale clients is the space that we know the best. And the reason being, it's the space that has the most amount of money into it. And the reason that is the case is because the hyperscaler, the end user, makes the most amount of money out of any other AI company. These companies are the biggest firms in the world, the most valuable companies in the world, and they're building the most valuable asset in the world, these AI, they're developing this AI. That's pretty much it. And they're developing AGI and SGI, which is what the AI race is all about. But because they can make so much money on the back end of operating their data centers, they can spend more money to actually get the infrastructure to build it out. And it costs them so much money to not have a data center operational, so they are just scrambling to get these sites rolling. There's been talk about a little bit of an AI bubble, and maybe there is one with all the hype that's around it, but I think there's so much utility in AI that I don't necessarily think the bubble, there might be a correction, but I think is pretty justified. How does a data center developer, hyperscale data center developer, make their money? So these sites, these hyperscale campuses, there's like sites that are onesies, twosies, where there's just like one data center and then there's an actual campus. And these campuses are huge. So these campuses could have multiple different data centers on it, could have on-site generation, like actual power plants on site. And when you have an actual campus, you need to actually start developing the infrastructure from the ground up. The demands on that campus are so immense. Take the Meta site down in Louisiana, for instance, the one that's going to be the size of Manhattan. That site, it's very hard to go and do like a brownfield or just like a powered shell and just like, what's the term, revamp it. what's the term? I'm trying to retrofit. That's the term. That entire site. So oftentimes these hyperscale sites are greenfield. They're literally just nothing, right? And so they have to start from scratch. It's land that they can get a ton of infrastructure to, like power, cooling, all that types of things. And then they can just develop these sites from the ground up. That's typically what we see with these sites, okay? So now I'm just giving you that background. Now you can understand the rest of this. So let's say you're a data center developer and you want to sell a site to a hyperscaler. Now, there's certain points and moments that you can actually do this. If you own the site and you did not do any work on getting the infrastructure to the site just yet, you can try, but you're probably going to get raw land pricing on. Reason being, there's a lot of legwork that has to be done to get all the gas to the site, all the water to the site, all the grid infrastructure to the site, doing all the zoning, getting everything squared away, sourcing the actual redundancy. There's a lot of things that has to happen for that site to then say that it actually has power, okay? And so what we're trying to do as a data center developer in the hyperscale data center space, you're trying to take raw land and turn it into powered land. And so as soon as you get to powered land, that is when you can get the most amount of value for that land while exiting entirely. And we've seen scenarios where there's been joint ventures, but for the most part, we've seen hyperscalers or other end users purchase land at that powered land multiple, okay, or that powered land point in time. So boiling it down, like these data center developers are making their money. They're buying a site, and then they go and they get all of the actual power and other infrastructure in place for that particular site, get it fully entitled, and then once it's all good to go and all risk is removed, they stop there. Once they are certain that they're going to have that power, and then that's when you can actually monetize and exit that particular deal. That's one point in time, okay? And now there's other bigger players, right? So if you're a smaller data center developer, that's a good way to do it. There's a lot of nuance to it. The grid interconnection process is very tough to navigate, and I'll do a full video on that so you guys understand that as well. But that's just one way these data center developers are making money. They take raw land, they turn it to power land, they exit, okay? The other way, a lot of these colo then are doing the same thing, but maybe instead of them actually taking raw land to powered land, they might take raw land to powered land and then actually start to develop the actual data center themselves because they have tons of capital. They're big companies as well. They're well funded and they can handle that capex. The capex of a full hyperscale data center, I think it's at $20 million per 1 megawatt right now. So a gigawatt site, which a lot of these hyperscale data centers are, would be then $20 billion to build out. I don't have $20 billion, not yet, not the time of recording this video, but maybe I will soon. But it's just a bear. It's a big thing to take on. And to still not even have a tenant, it's scary. These big colos will actually build these sites. And then when they build these sites, they take that risk. And when they take that risk, the tenant then signs up with them. The hyperscalers want that particular space. So it's like a tit for tat on there. So they might take raw land and do the whole process, right? But we've also seen a lot of colos very interested in purchasing in that raw land, or in that powered land threshold as well. They don't necessarily, nobody really wants to take raw land and turn it into powered land. It's just so hard and takes so much time. And it takes a lot of risk, a lot of failures, all different types of things, and it takes a lot of time. Did I emphasize that already? So then they like to skip to that powered land part so they can actually put an offer in on powered land and then do the entire build out like I just said, and then bring in that tenant because they make a lot of money when they have a tenant signed up. So that's just another way, another kind of format if you were a data center developer. For the most part though, if you're like looking to get into the data center development game, it's really tough to be able to finance and get a major data center infrastructure build out financed without a tenant. And that's usually the issue a lot of these companies that are not the colos are having to face. That's that. And so that's pretty much the hyperscale side. And the mechanics of this are starting to bleed into the smaller markets as well, the tier 2 and tier 3 operators and these sites, and even the Bitcoin miners, which I would even place like a little bit lower because they can't pay for a site as much as a data center could. And the reason, and so I guess the point where a piece of raw land becomes powered land is really when you get an interconnect agreement from the utility. Now, these agreements can come in different forms, but usually they come after they do the entire grid feasibility process. And I'm speaking more in generic terms because utilities and different grids and different transmission operators operate in different ways. Now, I'm just saying, once you have from the utility that they can give you this amount of power and they have it signed in an agreement with a load ramp that this can actually happen, and usually that's after a study that you had to pay money for. Once you have that piece of paper and they give you the cost of power as well, so the cost to upgrade all the power lines and substations, everything around it, that's really the valuable piece of paper. Because we've had in our own deals, end users didn't want us to negotiate the PPA directly. They wanted to handle it because they're bigger companies than us. They can oftentimes get a better rate in some cases than we could. That's just what was passed along to us, but also at the same time, it's the utility. So I'm not sure how that relationship goes too much. We're not privy to those insider conversations between the end user and the actual utility, but that's just what was told to me from the end users, okay? Once you have that grid interconnect agreement, sometimes class 5 on the power, and you have that load ramp, that's when you can actually do a deal, and that's when you're seeing these powered land multiples. And then if you can source power gen equipment on top of that, it's very useful. But having all that together takes a lot of work, and that's what we're seeing for the most part and how these data center developers are making money. There's other ways you can make money too. We've seen different, if you zoom in on that process from taking raw land to powered land, we've seen a ton of different developers starting to build behind the meter power on site, and then having a data center developer take some of that power and doing like a grid interconnection or like a microgrid. And there's all different types of nuances on this, but that for the most part is how we're seeing things shape out. There's other ways for data center developers to make money. We've seen like these sites that are already in the queue for the study process, the grid feasibility study. We've seen a lot of projects start to fizzle out in the queue. And so people just get tired of waiting. They get tired of spending money. They don't think they're going to get their return in a relatively reasonable time frame. So developers can then, instead of having to go buy raw land, they can just go buy a site that's already in the queue. And we've actually been looking at that. So if you have a site that's in the queue and you're tired of it and you want to sell it, bring it to us. We'll take a look at it. And I'll put a link below so you can actually contact us, and we'll get on a call and discuss it. But that's another way. But for the most part, that's how you guys are, as a data center developer, that's how you make money in the AI data center market and the data center space. And once again, you can apply these principles to all different types of silos. It's a little bit easier when you have a smaller site. Let's say you have a 100-acre site and you have 10, 20 megawatts of power. It's a little bit easier for you to then build out the entire data center, have your own data center, and then lease out the space to end users. Now, it is a little bit harder to lease out space to end users that never leased space from you yet. They wonder, do you have the balance sheet? Do you have the financing? Is this site going to be actually built? Are there going to be any issues with the actual infrastructure? All these different types of things. But you have a better chance of building and owning a full data center and then leasing it out at a smaller scale versus a hyperscale scale. So hope that helps. That's how data center developers make money. And there's obviously more ways to do it than this. But if you like this video, it's just bringing a little bit more awareness to the industry. And subscribe, and then turn the notification bell on, because I'm going to be coming back with more content that goes a little bit more in depth. All right. Hope you enjoyed it.